We turn next to the doctrine of creation ex nihilo. This doctrine, along with what we've just seen, preserves God's self-sufficiency by insisting that creation cannot benefit God in any way. If God is completely full within himself, he has no needs that must be met by creation. Edwards writes, "The notion of God's creating the world in order to receive anything properly from the creature is not only contrary to the nature of God, but inconsistent with the notion of creation, which implies a being's receiving its existence and all that belongs to its being out of nothing." But Edwards goes beyond merely affirming creation ex nihilo and goes on to affirm God's sustaining from nothing. Or to put it somewhat differently, God's preservation of the world is nothing but a continued act of creation ex nihilo. Let me quote Edwards at length from a sermon. "God is present everywhere, whereas any other being is only so by his operation and influence. God is in the continual exercise of his infinite power and wisdom throughout the whole creation. Every moment takes a continual act of infinite power to uphold things in being. When we look upon anything that we can behold, we see the present operation of infinite power, for the same power that made things to be the first moment that they ever were is now exercised to make them to be this moment, and is continually exercised to make them to be every moment that they are." He continues, "God's preservation of the world is nothing but a continued act of creation. We read that God created all things by the word of his power, and we read that he upholds all things by the word of his power. As it is the continual operation of God to uphold things in being, it is the divine operation that keeps them in action. So whenever a body moves, say my Bible moving, or a spirit thinks or wills, as I hope many of you are right now, it is infinite power and wisdom that assist it. God has established the laws of nature, and he maintains them by his constant influence. With respect to ourselves, it is because God is in us that our blood runs, our pulse beats, our lungs play, our food digests, and our organs of sense perform their function. So, when we look upon the sun, the moon, the stars above, look upon the earth or things below, if we look so much upon the stones or under them, we see infinite power now in exercise at that place. If we look upon ourselves and see our hands and feet, these members have an existence now because God is there and by an act of infinite power upholds them. God is not only everywhere, he is everywhere working." End quote. In this respect, God's relationship to the world is something like the relationship of an author and his story. The story and all that it contains exists first and foremost in the mind of the author. The Faun-tumnus exists only because C.S. Lewis wills him into being and continues to will him into being at every moment of the story. And though Edwards never makes use of an analogy like that, in my mind it captures very clearly what he intends. Such a conception of creation and preservation ex nihilo has tremendous ramifications for our understanding of nature, understanding of the scientific enterprise, relationship between divine sovereignty and human responsibility, among others, many of which Edwards explores in his writings. For our purpose, I'll simply highlight one. The doctrine of creation and preservation ex nihilo allows Edwards to make a full frontal assault on the cornerstone of Enlightenment thought, namely the quest for autonomy. If Edwards is correct, and creation owes its immediate existence at every moment to God's creative power, then it follows that there is no such thing as human autonomy, natural autonomy, scientific autonomy, or any other idol that the Enlightenment sought to set up. We are dependent upon God always and for everything, as is reason, nature, and any of these other realities. We are characters in God's story, and we can no more evade his active presence than Hamlet could evade Shakespeare's.